God has never been absent from creation. God's work of creation from before the beginning has been for the creation to know He who created it. He has always been close, but He was close in the garden. He walked with our first parents in the cool of the day. He was close, but clearly not close enough for them to know the true character of their cool of the day creator companion. Before the fall, they surely didn't know His justice or His mercy. And as soon as those two infinitely important facets of the signet ring of God's godhood shone brightly in their stay of execution and the just cursing of creation, they were expelled from the garden, never to return to the foot and spirit-worn paths through paradise. So His justice and His mercy were then known, but it was knowledge. Head broken from heart, touch, or intimacy. When my youth ministry mentor collapsed at 39, talking to his wife on the couch one evening, only to live several more days on machines, post-mortem showed that the connection between head and heart simply stopped. Man cannot long live with head separated from heart. After the garden, severed completely from a walk with Him, the knowledge of Him went from secondhand to story to legend to myth, and mankind showed His true de-gardened colors. From Genesis 6, 5 through 8, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that He had made man on the earth, and it grieved Him to His heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis says that Noah walked with God, so perhaps this would be the reunion creation longed for. Genesis tells us that God favored the man Noah to favor man through him. A man through whom to preserve mankind. And through that favor gave him instruction to build an ark so that some of creation would live through the coming judgment. And the flood of judgment surely came. And after the flood came the sun. And as His grace shone brightly through the vapors of His judgment, He said this in Genesis 9, 11 through 17. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So Noah knew the justice of God in flood. He knew the favor of God and the salvation of God through the ark. And in the rainbow of God, Noah knew the covenant-keeping grace of God. The rainbow, a symbol of the patience and love of God. A symbol to remind us of God's forbearance towards man, not a flag for man to bear in defiance of Him. So Noah was made to know His patience, his trustworthiness, and his favor. So God was close. But in the Tower of Babel, God was close. But in Abram, God was close enough to make a new covenant. He was close enough to talk and visit with, even break bread and find shade from the heat of the day. God was close enough to declare a promise to Abram, change his name, and make him a father of fathers. At Sodom, Abraham came to know God's ability to bring fire from heaven. In Sarah, he learned that fresh water could come from a dry well. And in Isaac, in Abraham, God was close. But in Isaac, God was close enough to provide for himself a lamb for the offering. Close enough to hear his voice and see his hand. In Isaac, God was close, but in Jacob, God was close enough to wrestle with him, but not without Jacob limping away from the encounter. In Jacob, God was close, but. And today, in Moses. It's said of Moses that he was a friend of God. A friend of God. Surely in and through Moses, we will see that God was close enough. From Exodus 33, 7 through 11, now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out of the tent, all the people would rise up, and each would stand at his tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent. And the Lord would speak with Moses. And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. Maybe in Moses, God would just simply be close enough, no buts. Moses, saved from the infanticide of Pharaoh's wrath, brought into the very household of that Pharaoh, only to be used by God to bring the roof down upon that household and that kingdom of that failed God, imposter, and usurper. Moses, spoken to by God through a bush that was not consumed by fire, but spoken through. Who heard in his own ears the very words of God declare from Genesis 3, 7 through 12, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me. And I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them come. I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? God said, I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Moses, the strong staff and marbled mouth, the strong staff and marbled mouth of God on earth. Moses, the man on first name basis with the great I am who created man. Moses, the conduit of God's righteous judgment upon Egypt in great plagues, and an angel of very unglad tidings. Moses, the man through whom God poured out a deluge of salty Red Sea justice upon his enemies, and a lamb-stained door of rescue for his children. Moses, the man who led Israel with a sheer wall of water of God's might to their left and his grace to their right, walked across the dry land of covenant into the land long promised by the God who carried them. Surely in this time and through this man, Moses, God would finally be found close enough. Perhaps even in this land of milk and honey, the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve could find a garden with the cool wind of God's footsteps again. But we find that in Moses, on the path to the threshold of that promised land, at the foot of Yahweh's mountain, we find a God who's close, but. From Exodus 19, starting in verse 1. On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They sent out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped before the mountain, while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever." When Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain." So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, "Be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman." Meaning now is not the time for distraction, pleasure, or procreation. Now is a time of presence. On the morning of the third day, there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. And they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to look, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set limits around the mountain and consecrate it. And the Lord said to him, go down and come up, bringing Aaron with you. But do not let the priest and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. And on that mountain, God delivered to Moses the Decalogue, the great 10 points of God's law. I grew up in the Scouts, in the Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. And I know the 12 points of the Scout law. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, honest, helpful, cheerful, helpful. If I hadn't written them down, I could do it. Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. If you broke one of the points of the Scout law, you broke the Scout law. Now, where would they get an idea like that? James tells us, James 2, 10 through 12, for whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become guilty of all of it. For he who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not commit murder. If you do not commit adultery but do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. There Moses, as a representative of the people on the mountain, received the 10 points of God's law. And if you were to break one of them, you were to break all of them. What were the 10 commandments? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. You shall observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. And you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. And what do those 10 commandments tell us about God? What did God tell Moses about himself for Moses to deliver to the people? If we're talking about closeness to God and not just obedience towards him, what can we learn about the character of God through them? What firsthand knowledge did Moses receive about the heart and character of God in those 10 commandments? Because surely the rules one makes says something about the one who makes the rules. You cannot chew near my ears. That is a commandment of Tommy Shelton. If you chew near my ears, the as yet unsanctified rage in me comes out. I can't explain it. It does not make sense. I'm not claiming that it makes sense, nor am I claiming that it is right for me to hulk out at the sound of chewing near my ears. What does that law tell you about me? I'm partially crazy. You have laws too, and if I knew them, I would know more about you. God's law was delivered to Moses to deliver to the people, to tell the people about God. To tell the people more about his heart and his character. I've heard it explained that commandments 1 through 4 teach us love for God, and commandments 5 through 10 teach us love for others. To that I say, bull sacrifice. I thought that was clever. All 10 teach us that to faithfully image God as God's image bearers, we cannot be whores of false worship, cursing God's name as restless brats committing murder and adulterous, thieving, dishonest discontent. Because that's not who God is. We are not called to be God's rule followers. We are called to be his image bearers. God doesn't follow rules. Rules follow God. The rules flow from God's heart and character. The Little Mermaid, Jiminy Cricket, Pocahontas, Anna, and Elsa are all dirty liars. We do not follow our hearts because our hearts are worse liars than they are. The only heart we are to follow is God's. And those commandments are an outpouring of his heart. We follow his heart. So there's our answer. It's Moses. Moses was close enough. But Exodus 19, 17 through 22, I have to read it again. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended on it in fire. Meaning the mountain is being consumed by the presence of God. You understand the smoke of it went up like a smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke. And God answered him in thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to look, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. They couldn't even look. The people couldn't even look. The man of God, Moses, was allowed to ascend the hill, to see the face of God and a fleeting glimpse of God's glory, and then come back down, radiating the presence and glory of God. But the people, even knowing more of who God is, cannot be where God is. They knew more about him, but they weren't one step closer to him. Job understood this. Job, from chapter 9, verses 30 through 33, says this. In his wrestling with God and trying to understand Job's own suffering, not questioning God's sovereignty, but wrestling. Job says, if I wash myself with snow and cleanse my hands with lye, yet you will plunge me into a pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. For he is not a man as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come to trial together. There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand on us both. Was Moses that arbiter? Could Moses bring us close? Could Moses lay a hand on us both? Could the law of God given through Moses make our hands clean enough to touch the very ground that God touches? No. Moses was a conduit of the knowledge of God's character, but not the arbiter of God's presence. In the shadow of the mountain of God's thunderous, white-hot presence, God's people could gather near, but not even touch, not even look. The very hand-chosen people of God were not even allowed to use their hands to touch his presence. The ground was cleaner than their hands, so they were kept at a distance. Through Moses, God was close. But not on this mountain. Maybe at a different place. Maybe at a different time. Maybe God himself could descend the hill. Maybe. But God's people will have to keep waiting, because close is not close enough. Let's pray.